Do you want to be the Baldur's Gate 3 version of a Jedi? Do you want to sling both spell and sword with ease? Or do you just want to do massive amounts of damage? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then this is the Baldur's Gate 3 build for you. So sit back, relax, and enjoy your time in Min-Maxer's Paradise. For this build, we will primarily take levels in Wizard, with a quick dip into Paladin near the end of Act 2. I went with Tab for this build, but you can go the Dark Urge if you want. For race, I went Githyanki, cause, well, this is a Gish, if you know, you know. But also, I wanted to gain access to Astral Knowledge. This will not be a Charisma build, so social encounters might be a struggle, and Astral Knowledge allows you to gain proficiency in all skills of an ability you select once per day. We can select Charisma to give our Gith a silver tongue. But if you don't really care about that, I'd suggest either Wood Elf or Wood Half Elf to pick up Fleet of Foot. This build will be zooming around the battlefield at top speed, so extra movement speed at character creation just leans into that. Our class will, of course, be Wizard. We'll get Arcane Recovery, which gives us charges we can use to replenish expended spell slots, 1 charge per level of the spell slot up to level 5. These charges replenish on a long rest, and we have a number of charges equal to half our wizard level rounded up, so just 1 for now. Our first cantrip will be Booming Blade. This will be the bread and butter of this build. Casting this spell includes hitting an enemy with our weapon. If that enemy then moves at some point that round, they take 1d8 thunder damage. Our next cantrip will be Friends. This spell will give us advantage on charisma checks against the target. Just remember, they'll turn hostile when the spell ends on higher difficulties, so make sure to move things along after you cast this, yeah? And lastly, let's get Firebolt for a ranged attack option. Next, for first level spells, we won't be wearing armor, so we need Mage Armor. As always, pick up the Shield spell. It gives you a +5 AC as a reaction to an enemy rolling high enough to hit you with an attack, letting you turn that hit into a miss. Find Familiar lets you summon a little buddy. I prefer the Raven, named Quoth for all the Edgar Allan Poe fans. It has the Rend Vision action that allows it to blind an enemy for 1 round upon a hit. But if you have a different familiar you prefer, let me know in the comments below. Longstrider boosts the creature's speed by 10 feet. And the nice thing about this spell, like Find Familiar, is that it's a ritual, which means you can cast it outside of combat without expending a spell slot. So cast this on the entire party, including your familiar, after each long rest. For the other 2 spells, Featherfall is situationally relevant even as far as Act 3, and Magic Missile is a decent auto-locking ranged option, which will be essential for dealing with creatures with Unstoppable later in the game. For now, we always want to keep Mage Armor, Shield, Find Familiar, and Longstrider prepared. For background, I went with Urchin, gaining proficiency in Stealth and Sleight of Hand, the latter of which is useful for the massive amount of lockpicking in the game. For abilities, let's start by getting our dex to 17 using the +2, we'll set our con at 14, and raise our intelligence to 16 using the +1, and we'll put the remaining points into charisma, leaving it at 10. The other 2 abilities we'll keep at 8. As for our skills, pick what you like, but I went with Insight to help us a bit in certain social encounters, and Arcana cause why not? You're a wizard. Also of note, because you're a wizard, you can add wizard spells into your spellbook by transcribing them from scrolls at the cost of some gold. And because we're multi-classing with Paladin, which is a half-caster, there are times we'll end up with spell slots higher than the spells we get from level ups. But we can always add spell scrolls of any level for which we have spell slots into our spellbook. If you've been enjoying this video so far, please give it a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel a lot, so I can give you more of these build guides. Thanks. Now back to the video. When we hit level 2, we'll pick our subclass, Blade Singing. This gives us proficiency in Performance, training in War and Song, which makes us proficient in light armor and a handful of different weapon types. And of course, we get Blade Song, which lets us, at no action cost, bump our AC and con saves up 2 and our movement speed up 10, while also granting advantage on acrobatics. So now, with Blade Song, we're faster and harder to hit, and it'll only get better from here. In addition, while Blade Song is active, casting first level or higher spells grants you a damage charge, while making a weapon attack grants you a healing charge. If you want to injure Blade Song early, you can do so at the cost of a bonus action and 10 feet of movement using Blade Song Climax, letting you jump 30 feet, and within a 10-foot radius of your landing point, deal 1d6 force damage for each damage charge you have. and heal yourself and your allies by 1d6 per healing charge you have. You can use Bladesong twice per long rest, and you can't use it when wearing medium or heavy armor or shields, or wielding anything other than daggers, longswords, rapiers, scimitars, short swords, or sickles. For spells, I'd pick up Thunder Wave to deal with those annoying scrying eyes you'll encounter in Acts 1 and 2, and Tasha's Hideous Laughter is worth our concentration for now. However, we will be concentrating on a different spell for most of our adventuring career. For weapons, pick either Short Sword or Scimitar, which both deal a d6 damage, and have the Light property so you can dual wield them without a feat, and the Finesse property so you can use your dex when you attack with them. At level 3, we'll finally get access to second level spells. We want Mirror Image, which calls for 3 illusory duplicates, each adding 3 to our AC. However, we do lose a duplicate each time a creature misses us with an attack. This spell will be foundational in getting our AC so high, the enemy AI won't even bother attacking us. And of course, the reason why we're here, Shadow Blade. This lets us summon a short sword made of pure shadow, dealing 2d8 plus our dex mod and psychic damage when we wield it in our main hand. And as you'll see later in this video, the damage scales very nicely. On top of all that, this blade grants advantage on attacks against enemies in dim light or darkness, including those made with our offhand weapon. And you can go ahead and add both of these spells to your prepared list, only swapping out any of the spells you see here when the situation calls for it. When we reach level 4, we'll get another cantrip. Your choice doesn't really matter, but I went with Acid Splash to have a little AoE option. Adding to our spellbook, let's pick up Dark Vision if we're Githyanki, or any other race that doesn't have Dark Vision. Otherwise, See Invisibility can be useful, especially in the late game. I'd also get Misty Step. If you went Githyanki, you will be getting this spell as a racial feature, but having it in your spellbook means you can cast it more than once per long rest. For the feat we get at this level, let's pick up Mobile, increasing our speed by another 10 feet, making it so difficult terrain doesn't slow us down when we dash, and giving our enemies the sluggardly condition after we make a melee attack against them, making it so they don't get an opportunity attack against us when we move away from them, regardless of whether or not we hit. So now we can hit an enemy with Booming Blade and move away from them, and because the enemy AI likes to move around so much in this game, you can all but guarantee the subsequent thunder damage. At level 5, we get one more use of Bladesong per long rest for a total of 3. And our Bladesong gets better, now granting us a +3 to AC and con saves while it's active. We also get access to 3rd level spells. We very much want Haste, which gives us a +2 to AC, advantage on dex saves, doubles our movement speed, and lets us take one more action per turn. Now this spell is concentration, and we'll want to use it in pretty much every combat. So going forward, we'll mostly avoid picking concentration spells. The one big downside of Haste is when we lose the hasted condition, we become lethargic, shutting us down for a whole round. So we want to protect our concentration at all costs, which is why we're going to be so tanky. Let's also get Counterspell, which lets us use our reaction to stop an enemy from casting a spell. Now let's add Haste to our prepared spells, and the final prepared spot can be used for whatever we need situationally. 2 more things to note. First, our Booming Blade upgrades at this level, now dealing an additional 1d8 thunder damage on the initial hit and 2d8 if the target moves. Second, now we can cast Shadow Blade at 3rd level, increasing the damage to 3d8 plus our dex mod. For equipment, we want the following. Diadem of Arcane Synergy gives us 2 rounds of Arcane Synergy whenever we inflict a condition. Arcane Synergy lets our weapon attacks deal additional damage equal to our spellcasting ability modifier. Intelligence is our spellcasting ability as a wizard. Our modifier is 3, so that's 3 extra damage. And Arcane Synergy procs with basically any condition we give enemies, including Sluggardly from our mobile feat and Booming Blade. So that means we always have Arcane Synergy after our first attack in combat. The Diadem of Arcane Synergy is carried by Ardent Jerizath, here, and Kresh Yelik. Next, we want the Graceful Cloth. It raises our dex by 2 to a maximum of 20, increasing our AC, initiative bonus, and attack and damage bonuses. We also gain advantage on dexterity checks and only take half damage from falling. And if all that wasn't enough, we get a +1 to dexterity saves and 5 feet added to our jump distance. This rare clothing is sold by Lady Esther here on the Rosy Morn Monastery Trail. For footwear, we want the Boots of Stormy Clamor, which inflict 2 turns of reverberation whenever we give an enemy a condition. Reverberation gives an enemy a -1 to physical saving throws per remaining turn. And when a creature gets 5 or more turns, it takes 1d4 thunder damage and must succeed on a dex save or fall prone. These boots can be obtained from the Mind Flayer Omalum after talking to his buddy Blurg, and completing the quest, help Omalum investigate the parasite. Blurg and Omalum can be found here in Ebon Lake Grotto in the Underdark. Let's get the Bracers of Defense, which increase our AC by 2 as long as we're not wearing armor or holding a shield. The Bracers can be found by entering this trapdoor in the Blighted Village, pulling this lever, going through this hidden door, taking a right to reach this magic mirror, convincing it to open for you, and they'll be right here in a gilded chest in the corner of this hidden laboratory. Here's what that path looks like on the map. The first ring we'll likely pick up is the Caustic Band. It simply adds 2 acid damage to our weapon attacks. It's sold by Dareth Bonecloak, also in Ebon Lake Grotto, here in the Underdark. The Strange Conduit Ring lets us add 1d4 psychic damage to our weapon attacks while concentrating on a spell, which will likely be Haste. You can get this ring from a chest in the Inquisitor's Chamber, here in the Creche. We also want Broodmother's Revenge. This amulet coats our weapons in magical poison, causing them to deal an additional 1d6 poison damage. This lasts for 3 rounds and happens whenever we are healed, including via a short rest. So be sure to heal your character in some way immediately before combat. This amulet is carried by Kaga, here in the Emerald Grove. Outside of combat, we can throw on the Pearl of Power amulet to get back an expended spell slot of 3rd level or lower. This can help us get the most out of our long rest. Just remember to swap back to Broodmother's Revenge when you're done. Like Boots of Stormy Clamor, you can find the Pearl of Power at Omalum's shop. For weapons, we want Shadow Blade in our main hand, as mentioned before, and in our offhand, we want Knife of the Undermountain King. This weapon also has the Shadow Blade feature, which is redundant for us, but the real draw is Organ Rearranger, which increases our crit chance by 1, and more importantly, lets us re-roll damage dice with a result of 2 or less, taking the highest result. And this feature applies to both our weapons, as well as any additional damage dice we add to our attacks, such as Booming Blade, Strange Conduit, or Broodmother's Revenge, increasing our average damage output. This short sword is sold by Ajaknir Jira, here in the Creche. Lastly, we won't use any ranged weapons, so don't worry about that. Before we head out of Act 1, let's not forget to stop by Auntie Ethel and make a deal after besting her in combat in her lair. She'll give us a bit of her hair, and we'll pick the Dexterity option, granting us a permanent +1 to Dex, getting it to 18 or 20 with Graceful Cloth. That means our Armour Class will now be 20 normally, and after we add the +3 from Blade Song, +2 from Haste, and +9 from Mirror Image, we'll reach a ridiculous total of 34. So we should definitely buff with all 3, and then wait around before starting combat to maximize our action economy. You can find Ethel here at the Tea House. And lastly, while it's not required, I'd highly recommend consuming a couple of tadpoles to unlock Favorable Beginnings, which gives you a bonus equal to your proficiency bonus for the first attack roll or ability check you make against the target, and Luck of the Far Realms, which lets you turn a hit into a crit once per day. At level 6, we're sticking with Wizard to gain extra attack. This lets us attack twice instead of once when we attack with our action, and one of those attacks can be Booming Blade. The unfortunate thing is that, using the Honor Mode rules, the extra action we get from Haste does not get this benefit. So our opening round will look like this. Booming Blade with our Shadow Blade, follow up with an additional Shadow Blade swing from extra attack, Booming Blade with our hasted action, and attack with Knife of the Undermountain King for our bonus action, for a total of 4 attacks. And if you're playing on lower difficulties, you should get an extra Shadow Blade attack with your hasted action, for a total of 5. For our new spells, again, we're avoiding concentration spells, so let's pick up Fireball and Lightning Bolt for some iconic AoE options. When we hit level 7, things get a little inconvenient. Remember how Arcane Synergy adds our spellcasting ability modifier to our damage when we inflict a condition? Well, for some reason, this uses the spellcasting ability modifier of the most recently added spellcasting class, and since our next class will be Paladin, That means it'll use our charisma modifier, which is 0. I hope Larian fixes this so that such features just use whichever spellcasting ability is higher, similar to how finesse weapons default to either strength or dex, whichever's higher. But anyway, in the meantime, we'll have to cough up 100 gold to Withers to respec and start with Paladin. We'll go with Oath of the Crown as our subclass. Ancients and Vengeance both grant features that scale with Charisma, and Devotion's feature is only useful for an ally. But Oath of the Crown gives us Righteous Clarity, which lets us use a bonus action to grant either us or an ally a bonus to attack rolls equal to their proficiency bonus. So we'll definitely add that to our pre-combat buff routine. We'll use the same starting ability scores as before, and for skills, let's pick Insight, and either Religion if you're Githyanki and using Astral Knowledge for Charisma skills, or Intimidation or Persuasion if not. Now, re-level up all 6 levels of Bladesinger exactly as before, except I would swap out Hideous Laughter to avoid the concentration conflict with Haste, and instead pick up Ice Knife to add a new damage type to our repertoire. At character level 8, we'll take our second and final level of Paladin, and we'll get what we went through all this trouble for. Divine Smite, a melee damage dealer's dream. This lets us burn a first level spell slot to add 2d8 radiant damage to a melee attack. This damage increases to 3d8 if you're attacking fiends or undead, and it scales if you use higher level spell slots, giving you an additional d8 per level higher than first. This maxes out at 5d8 or 6d8 versus fiends and undead. And remember, all of these damage dice benefit from the reroll feature of our Knife of the Undermountain King, letting us do massive amounts of damage. I would highly recommend going to the Reactions tab of your character sheet to make sure all your smite options say, ask for confirmation upon trigger. That way you can easily cast Booming Blade and stack some smite damage on top of it if necessary. Fighting style could not matter less, as none of these options give this build any benefits, so pick whatever. For spells, our only non-concentration options are Command, Cure Wounds, and Thunderous Smite. I'd say pick up Thunderous Smite and Cure Wounds, as our Paladin spell DC would be too low to bother with Command. For equipment in Act 2, we'll pick up the Cloak of Protection, which very simply gives a +1 to AC and all saving throws. It's sold by Quartermaster Tally, here, at the Last Light Inn. Let's swap out Caustic Band for Killer Sweetheart. This gives you a special Executioner reaction after you defeat a creature. Once per day, you can use this reaction to turn an attack roll into a critical hit. Along with Luck of the Far Realms, this gives us 2 guaranteed crits per day. A huge boon against bosses. It can be found after completing the self-same trial, here, in the Gauntlet of Shar. And once that's spent, we'll probably want to replace that ring for something else. So let's pick up the Shadow Cloaked ring. This boosts our weapon's damage by 1d4 against lightly or heavily obscured creatures, as well as those made of shadow. You can loot it off the Shadow Mastiff Alpha, which appears after all the ever-burning torches are destroyed, here in the Shadow Cursed Lands. Whenever we're fighting humanoids, let's swap out Broodmother's Revenge for Surgeon Subjugation Amulet. Once per day, this lets you instantly paralyze a humanoid for 2 turns when you crit against them. While paralyzed, the creature can't move or act, and all attacks against them within 10 feet auto crit. This amulet is worn by the creepy doctor, Malice Thorm, here in the House of Healing. Let's also pick up the Spellcrux amulet. Once per long rest, this allows you to use a bonus action to replenish an expended spell slot of any level. And given how many will burn through buffing and smiting, this is quite useful. So, like the Pearl of Power, just put it on when you need to use it, and swap back to one of your other amulets when you're done. This item can be found on the Warden, here in the prison, beneath Moonrise Towers. And the last thing we want to procure is the Resonance Stone. You don't even need to equip this, you just carry it on your person. And all creatures within 30 feet of the stone, including yourself and any allies in that area, are steeped in bliss, granting them advantage on physical checks, disadvantage on mental saving throws, and vulnerability to psychic damage. This doesn't work on undead or constructs, but for all other enemies, you can double the psychic damage you deal, making it ideal for us. Just be careful using it around enemies that also dish out psychic damage, such as Mind Flayers. The Resonance Stone can be found here, in the Mind Flayer colony. At character level 9, we're going back to Wizard, where we get access to 4th level spells. Dimension Door can help you cover large distances on the battlefield and bring a friend with you, which is useful in the final battle. And Invisibility or Greater Invisibility are both worth concentrating on outside of combat, in case you need to move about unnoticed. And by this point in the game, you will be facing a lot of spellcasters, so go ahead and keep Counterspell prepared. At character level 10, We've exhausted most of the non-concentration spells we'll need, so pick what you like. I went with Glyph of Warding for another AoE option, and Remove Curse, which is very situational, but a nice thing to have when you need it. We also get our second feat at this level, so let's choose ability score improvement and get our dex up 2 points, since we will be swapping out of Graceful Cloth at this level. More on that in a moment. We also get our first 5th level spell slot, which we can use to upcast Shadow Blade, so it can now do 4d8 plus our dex mod and psychic damage. At character level 11, our Blade Song improves again. We can use it 4 times per long rest now, and the AC and Constitution save buffs increase to +4. We can also pick up 5th level spells. I definitely start by getting Cone of Cold, a high damage AoE spell. I'd also get See Invisibility if I don't have it at this point. There are some annoying late game enemies that can turn invisible at the end of every turn, and this can help deal with that. But if you already have that spell, instead, get something like Conjure Elemental to call an elemental buddy to fight by your side in battle. Also, our Booming Blade upgrades one last time, dealing 2d8 on the initial hit and 3d8 when the target moves. At character level 12, we'll take our 10th and final level of Wizard. We get Song of Defense, which lets us expend a spell slot to reduce incoming damage by 5 per spell slot. Now, I'm gonna level with you. I never once got this to work. Enemies weren't hitting me with attacks at this point, and the only times I took damage were when enemies could reflect damage dealt to them back at the attacker. And for some reason, this did not trigger Song of Defense for me. Not sure if this is just a bug, but let me know if you've had a different experience with this feature in the comments below. We get another cantrip, pick whatever you like. I went with Ray of Frost to slow down enemies. For leveled spells, I'm going to say pick what you like one last time. Grant Flight can provide some fun out of combat mobility, and you can pick Conjure Elementals if you didn't get it last level. But if you did, Gust of Wind is good for some soft crowd control. Let's also make a visit to the Mirror of Loss, interact with it, and select the Thief Memory to get a permanent +2 to Dex, getting it to a total of 22. You can find the mirror here, in the Chamber of Loss, inside the House of Grief, here, in the Lower City. For equipment, we want to replace the Cloak of Protection with the Cloak of Displacement. At the start of your turn in combat, this cloak activates, giving enemies disadvantage to hit you, lasting until you take damage. This cloak is sold at Danthalon's Dancing Axe, here, in Worm's Crossing. As mentioned earlier, we'll swap out Graceful Cloth at level 10, and we'll replace it with Robe of Supreme Defences. When you're concentrating on a spell while wearing this, you add your spellcasting modifier to your saves and a +1 to your AC. This is sold by Ferg, here, in Rivington. We'll also don the Amulet of Greater Health, which straight up sets your Constitution score at 23. To get the most out of this, we will have to respec one last time. This time setting our Con to 8 and raising our Wisdom to 14 to increase that important saving throw. You can find this amulet inside the House of Hope, which can be entered by completing the ritual in the upper floor of the Devil's Fee, here, in the Lower City. Let's replace the Boots of Stormy Clamor with Bone Spike Boots. They increase our jump distance by 5, give us Brutal Leap, which lets us use our bonus action to leap and possibly knock an enemy prone. But most importantly for us, they give us a +1 to our AC and saves when we're not wearing armor. So with these, once we're fully buffed, we'll have an AC of 36, and saving throws that look like this. You can find them in a chest, in this cave, off of the western beach, near Rivington. And lastly, our AC is high enough without them, so go ahead and ditch the Bracers of Defense for Quick Spell Gloves. These allow you to cast an action cantrip as a bonus action once per short rest. Just make sure to toggle them on before you cast the spell. These gloves are sold here, at the front desk of Sorcerer's Sundries, in the Lower City. Now let's see how this build performs, shall we? Start with Booming Blade. If the target wasn't already paralyzed, I'd use Executioner here. Now smite damage caps at a 4th level spell slot, so don't try this at home if you're conserving spell slots. Next, a regular Shadow Blade attack, smite again, hasted action, Booming Blade, smite again, activate the Quick Spell Gloves, Booming Blade, I'm gonna keep it a buck. This build is broken. So that, fellow adventurers, was the Shadow Saber build for Baldur's Gate 3. Give it a try for yourself. And if you enjoyed what you saw here today, Please like, comment, and subscribe to Min-Maxer's Paradise, the place for build guides for your favorite role-playing video games. Thanks for watching. Till next time.